Hello everybody and welcome to the Brexit webinar from the BIA for August. As you can see, we've 224 days till Brexit, or 846 days to the end of transition if you're following that agenda. So welcome, and if you look at what we are going to do this week, we're going to talk about what's happened with negotiations, what's happened in the UK, looking at the regulation and implementation period, no deal preparation, trade policy and a CBI publication, EU update on what's going on from the EMA, and a little bit on what we've been doing as the BIA. If you don't know me or my voice, my name's Steve Bates and I'm the Chief Exec of the BIA. The other person you'll hear on this webinar is Laura Collister, who's the Brexit lead here at the BIA. As many of you will know, we've been doing these monthly and it's available on YouTube at the link below there. If you wanted detail on the Chequers deal, the Brexit white paper and such like, it's available on that one, and we leave it on if it is useful for you or colleagues during the month. So I'll move forward to what's been going on with the negotiations, and we have a fabulous picture here of the new UK Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab meeting Michael Barnier. They are actually, well, there's formal negotiations this week. One day is being done on withdrawal agreement and another day on future relationship. Not too much coming from it yet, but they are working through August. The other thing that's happening outside of those formal negotiations is UK ministers are touring the EU and talking to the various different national governments. You can see a picture here of Jeremy Hunt, who we would mostly have known as the Health Secretary, now the Foreign Secretary, off to France and Austria. And Prime Minister May has also been out and about. So we've seen some of that, and there's obviously some negotiations going on at national level, as well as the formal ones between the UK and the EU. And we've seen various news in the media as a result of that. I was interested to see the position from the Austrian government, particularly as they hold the presidency of the EU for the next 6 months, talking about the need for this. And we'll see whether the result of the summer tours results in a change in the negotiation posture or speeding up or slowing down of it, I think, in the coming weeks. But I think we can see the formal process and then the informal process around it has been stepped up a pace, I think, since last month, and August has been busy, even if it's not produced formal outcomes yet. And just to keep in mind some of the dates that are coming up in terms of the negotiations. For our sector, there's an informal Health Council of Ministers 10th and 11th of September in Brussels. There's been talk as to whether the informal summit the end of September might be an important staging post. Some people think it is, some people think it isn't. If I can mark your card, we're doing some events with Biotechnology now on science and collaboration, both in Hanover and at our key autumn event on the 18th, the UK Bioscience Forum, where we'll talk about this. I hope it won't be formally part of the negotiation, but we hope we'll be able to comment on it there. And then the European Council's October, December. In January, we expect some new things to start to happen in terms of customs declaration, the European Council, exit day, when the European Medicines Agency is supposed to move, and if there needs to be an extraordinary EU summit shortly after Brexit. So those are sort of some of the dates that remain in the calendar. I suppose the important thing really this month has been the development of outcomes in the UK, and the UK government a couple of weeks ago issued details of the implementation period, what it means for life science sector, and I'm going to talk about this crudely as in a sense detail of what the deal scenario, if there was to be a deal, might look like for medicines. Now, it's important here to do caveats and red warning signs. I was going to try and make this flash, but my PowerPoint isn't up to that. So the next couple of slides are all about if there is a successful negotiation outcome, if there is a deal. That deal is not yet done. We're not even sure there will be a deal, but if there was a deal, this could be the basis on which some of it could be organised, and I'll explain why in a sec. Of course, this document that's come from the UK government is not a legal text. It is guidance. It is government guidance on the implementation period. It is technical information on what the implementation period means. It's further detail on the clinical trial regulation and some information on medical devices and UK notified bodies. And I suppose the important thing that I would stress from a BIA perspective here is you asked us to get clarity from the government as soon as we could about what things would look like in a scenario. The government have been kind enough to respond to that request, and I hope that you found having some of this documentation in the public domain for the last couple of weeks has been helpful and been able to answer from a government's perspective some of the questions that you've been putting to us. So I hope that you can see the value of the engagement that we've had. I'm clear that it won't answer all your questions, but I hope you can see it's greater clarity enables you to plan for your business needs appropriately. What have we done with this? Hopefully you got newscast a couple of weeks ago if you weren't on holiday, but dig back in through your emails if you get weekly update newscast, which we explained it. I believe that this set of information is positive for the sector. It's at the upper end of my expectation in terms of business disruption, in terms of what an implementation period could look like. Obviously, it doesn't answer all questions, and I think it's more like what you guys want from us and the outcome than guidance we've seen so far from the European Medicines Agency. But it's guidance on the basis that a deal's done and a deal hasn't yet been done. So you can't say, don't come back to me next year and say, Steve, you said this is what it's going to be like. I'm saying this is what it could be like if a deal is done and we are not yet there. But I think it is useful to have that greater clarity. I'm not going to look to go through all of the document in detail, but I think the technical information document from the MHRA is probably the most useful of the documents that are in the public domain. You can see here some of the highlights, and I would encourage you to go to the government website and have a look at this document and see which of the questions it answers on medicines regulation. I think it also is important on import testing of intermediaries, and says that UK batch testing release of IMPs will also be recognised in the EU and vice versa. So some important stuff here and some important statements as to essentially what a deal scenario could look like. Caveats: this is not legal guidance, this is not legal text, a deal has not yet been done, but very useful, I think, to see this in this degree of detail. However, for those of you who are eagle-eyed, you will have seen, if you look at some of the detail in the documentation, that if you line it up against the latest from the European Medicines Agency, so on the left-hand side here, we've put the Q&A relating to the EU's withdrawal from the EU regarding centralised procedures, and the question Q&As on QP, PV, and on the right, the document from the UK government published on the 6th of August on the location of QP, PV, and you will see, as I know all of you are fully qualified lawyers, that the two are not absolutely the same, and therefore the guidance has some difference between them. Now, you will say, which of these is right? Which of these should I follow? Which of these is the outcome that we will get? And the answer is, I don't know. But I suppose where I'm at is I'm taking a view that these happen in sequence. The one on the left was published in June. The one on the right was published in August. And this is where my deductive skills have got us to. There is a dog that is not barking. And what I mean by this is I'm going to have to take you into the history of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. There's an important part in Sherlock Holmes where, to solve a crime, he is asked by the detective, is there any other point to which you would wish to draw my attention? And Holmes said, the curious incident of the dog in the night time. And the detective says, the dog did nothing in the night time. And Holmes says, yes, that was the curious incident. So my point here is when I look at these two divergent positions, what I see is a dog that is not barking, and that is that I have seen no reaction publicly or privately from the EU to the UK government document that came out. And my interpretation of that is that it is significant and that there would have been pushback if there had been a big concern with it. It's only a deduction. I'd claim no special powers to the level of Sherlock Holmes, but that is how I have read both the UK government document that's gone into the public domain and that of others. I am not running your business for you. I am not responsible for your top or bottom line, and I'm afraid I can only provide you my guidance on their guidance. I wish I could give you absolute clarity. I can't, but I read this as significant, but I can't guarantee that this is where we will get to. So please read the documents. They are important, but I think they have to be read with a pinch of salt. And apologies, that's the best I can get to as to analysis. So I think the stuff from the government is helpful. I think it could be the sense of what a deal could look like in greater detail. I think clarity and certainty at this stage is important, but it's also important that we make sure that the stuff that we see from the UK government and MHRA is in line with the withdrawal agreement and EMA guidance. At the moment, we're not quite there yet. So interpretation of this is one that I think you can bear many interpretations on the data in front of you. I've given you my take on it, but others are valid, and we continue to work on this going forward. The flip side of deal preparation is preparation for no deal, and just to take you through what we've gleaned from publicly available sources. You'll remember before the holiday period, the UK Prime Minister said in Parliament, the liaison committee, that the government will be stepping up its preparations for breakdown with the negotiations with the EU, that they would plan to issue technical notifications on no deal scenarios over August and September, and that there would be earlier information given for specific business concern where preparation might take time. So that's what we've been working on as the basis of what the UK government will be doing in terms of no deal. And then you'll have seen there's various bits in the papers at the moment and around. So there has been a leak to a website called BuzzFeed, which suggests the name of the technical notes that might come out soon, and we've put them in here. I don't know whether they're right or wrong, but you can see that there's some there that would be of interest to our sector if they were to come out, and if our sector was one where preparations might take time, you might think they might come out sooner. And if you read Britain's best-selling newspaper, The Sun, there was a story today which said that stuff from the government around this was expected to be in the first papers, which might be released next week. So I think what we're doing, what I'm planning to do is, my planning assumption now, having read the papers, is that there might be some stuff coming next week. And if that was to be so, it might be about how a no deal might work. And we would do an additional Brexit member webinar in the event of that next week. So we'll open up registration and mark in your diary that we may well do another one of these if there is more info coming next week. And because it's bank holiday weekend and I've got plans to get away, we'll look at do something on middle of the afternoon, 3 o'clock next Friday, if more has come out on no deal. So I won't look to spend too much more time on no deal, but I'll hand over now to Laura to talk about other matters. Laura.
So a bit of a change and a bit of a move away from regulation and deal and no deal, and looking a little bit further into the future. So one of the areas that BIA has been working on for the last couple of years is around trade policy. We've done a lot of work around the Brexit part, so the contingency planning and customs, etc. But now we want to include some of our focus on what should happen into trade policy in the future. So we want to create a forum for BI members that are interested in the area and sort of bring together a community of interest for sort of sharing information, but also providing information and producing something that sort of represents the industry. So our overarching aim is that the UK trade policy basically works best for the benefit of the UK life sciences ecosystem and the UK economy. So areas that we think we should be looking at in more detail, but would also be very welcome, open to other suggestions or suggestions of things we should potentially move away from, should be things such as like, should science and innovation collaboration be included in future FTAs? How does regulation both of medicines and business work with FTAs? We know that IP is an issue. How do we include new medical innovation as that moves forward, such as genomics and AI? Looking at some of the issues encountered like tariffs, etc., and how do we engage with the WTO? A few more sort of bit more specific BIA things in terms around fundraising and raising money. How does that work in the context of a free trade agreement, and how can we get the best deal for members in the UK life sciences ecosystem and representation in that. Then obviously BIA does a lot of international work, and we've done things in the last year, and we've got plans to do things in the US, China, Japan and Israel, and obviously that should sort of link into some of that future trade work. As I said, we're also open to other suggestions. So who do we think might like to be involved, and what do we want to do about it? Firstly, I think it's sort of quite a broad part of membership we think might be interested. So the small companies who are scaling, who may not have a product yet that specifically want to export, but are thinking about R&D and how collaboration might work, or looking towards future launch markets. So preparing that future, that FTA, if you have a market in mind in the future, bearing in mind that FTAs take a long time to work. So US FTA will probably be looking 3, 4, 5 years before that happened. Probably multinationals, obviously there are some that export from the UK, there's others that invest in the UK, but also invest in the broader life sciences ecosystem here, both in terms of just sites, but there's also the corporate venture capital piece, research organisations and institutes who might be interested in how science and collaboration is included in FTA. And then also we recognise that within our membership we have a lot of organisations that provide advice to SMEs, and we'd like to them included. As I mentioned, we're looking at sort of what our future trade policy should be, and we have hopefully in the next week or 2 weeks, we should have something that we would like to get our members' views on, so we can have a broad representation. We would also, depending on interest, bring people together in the future. What we're not looking to do is create anything onerous or which is hard and takes up lots of time. What we want to do is create that community which sort of helps companies, but also takes that sort of a bit of a longer term view of how we make that policy the best it can be for the sector. So if you're interested, please do let me know, both in terms of if you want to know more about stuff as we develop it, whether you're interested in inputting into a possible paper and seeing it and providing comments, as we sort of do response to the Department of International Consultations at the moment on the Trans-Pacific partnership, and then also the US FTA. So please just let me know. My email address is there. Another small change of direction, just quickly to highlight, CBI produced an immigration paper this week that looked at sort of future immigration systems. Just wanted to highlight that there is a life sciences section which sort of took some of the work that BIA did along with ABPI in response to the Migration Advisory Committee, and highlighted the importance of the sector in that. I think this is the first of probably many things coming out of potential future immigration systems. I'd expect quite a lot more, and especially as we sort of head towards an immigration white paper or immigration bill coming up this autumn. Quickly moving on to the EU, earlier in August, the EMA published a Brexit preparedness publication. Earlier this year, or maybe at the end of last year, they already published documents that scale back some activities. This document scales back further activities from October at the latest. It's because they are losing more staff than had initially anticipated, and due to contractor rules, they're losing a number of contractors. So I think sort of their in document states that they expect to lose staff at about 30% of their staff. So there's a number of activities here that I've highlighted that are included in those that will no longer be done. Brexit Health Alliance then sort of looked at that, and they've written there's a really good opinion piece in the FT, which was earlier this week, looking at sort of what the impact could be there, which we would recommend having a read. And then finally, just to highlight from an EU perspective, European Industry Coalition, which BIA is a member, along with Eurobio and other European trade associations, still is continuing to work. They're continuing to engage at the EMA and European Commission level, and they're also focusing their efforts at the moment, sort of not only just long term, but also following some of that EMA work and the EMA survey earlier in the summer, looking at how you ensure the continued supply of medicine, especially including in a no deal. In terms of what we've been up to, you'll notice that there's been a bit of a lack of cartoons in this one. I usually have quite a few from the Telegraph, and they are on holiday this week. So obviously it is August, we have had some holidays. We have also obviously carried on doing webinars. We have quite a few events and meetings coming up, and we have been continuing to update our members. What's coming up, obviously there's potentially some government no deal planning, announcements, engagements. We will communicate to members, and we will, I think as Steve was saying, we will hopefully, if they are next week, we will do a webinar for members to try and work out what it means. If it's the week after, we will do a webinar the week after, but when there is something, we will try and bring everyone together to discuss it in a bit more detail. As I mentioned, we're also looking at some of the day one trade policy issues, especially around customs, which some of our members highlighted as being a massive concern to them, and we have an event with Treasury coming up towards the end of August. I mentioned the future trade policy paper. There's an EU relationship group in September, followed by an industry association coalition meeting on the 18th of September. And we will also be having an extra Brexit Lead Network event, which will be on the 19th of September. That event isn't on the website yet. It's an extra one. We committed to do 4 during the year. We were anticipating having the 4th in November, but given the amount of things happening, the plan is to do an extra shorter one on the 19th of September, probably from 9 to 11:30, and with MHRA and government speaking around some of the announcements happening. And obviously we'll carry on talking to the media. This is probably the 3rd time in a row I've put this slide in there, but just a quick reminder, we're still hoping for the same outcome. We've talked a lot about some of the detail and what happens if there's no deal, but this is still our main focus of trying to get the best outcome in terms of the trade and regulation around cooperation, movement of people, and then continuing engagement with Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020.
Thanks, Laura. And you can see there's been great work by Laura over the summer on this stuff, and I do encourage you to engage with us on the trade issues. I think they are going to be an important part of business going forward, probably not immediately, but we're laying the tracks now for the future. So where have we got to in the summer? I think we've got some more information on regulation to increase clarity if there's a deal. We may shortly have some clarity from the government if there's not going to be a deal, and we'll see what that comes like. And the EMA relocation is tough and impacting their work more than they initially thought. So I think that's probably where we're at in terms of now. I will now, if you want to type some questions into the boxes or comments, I will endeavour to answer them or give some thoughts. So Chris has written a note about the Innovative Medicines Initiative as calls out for grant funding. Is there an ask to the UK government for clarity on whether these will still be open to UK companies after March, and any notion of replacement funding if they are not open? So Chris, I think this falls into the bucket of continued cooperation on science and innovation. That is something that was not in the formal documents that came out this month, but were in the formal documents in the Chequers deal. There is an ask from the UK government for continued cooperation on science and innovation. It was dealt with in the previous webinar to some extent. I think at the moment it is unclear how that will operate. I think there is a clear aspiration from the UK government for continued cooperation, remembering that the UK government is looking to pay to play. We're aware that there is already disruption as to ones that are in existing that are in play at the moment, and we hope that this will be part of a deal. We've also looked at the rules for the future Horizon Europe pots, which are under discussion at the EU level, and hopefully they have some flexibility about the ability for third countries from the EU, e.g. countries like Israel, Norway, Switzerland, and potentially the UK, if the UK's out in that format to continue to participate in those things. So I think the answer is it depends on what the deal is and how the deal is done. We're aware of some sentiment from partners that they've not included people in things, but I think it will come out as a result of the science and innovation part of any deal, which is as yet unclear, but is certainly what the UK has asked for. Hope that's helpful. David asks, do you have any recommended resources for measures that UK SMEs can take to help minimise the impact of a no-deal Brexit on their EU revenue? The pros and cons of setting up outside. I don't, but I am aware, and I'm talking to some companies that think they may be able to help us in this space. Can I ask that you keep tuned to this, because I'm conscious that perhaps as we go through a period where we now get to some clarity as to what deal or no deal looks like, or we're very close on, people will start to make different levels, different business decisions, and we may have some ways in which we can help you do this on resource that we've got and the speed at which this is moving. I hope that the communication and the sharing that we're able to do in real time is the best thing we can do with the resource that we've got. What's coming out next week on a no-deal Brexit? Would it be one of the 70-odd technical notices on life sciences or something different? The answer, Ian, is I don't really know. My reading of that was based on the Prime Minister saying there would be technical notices. There's speculation in the papers today that the list of those includes one that says life science in the BuzzFeed article. So potentially there could be some stuff, and I'm just really getting us ready for that, knowing the interest there will be from members and the challenge that we'll have if we try and ramp something up midweek ahead of a bank holiday weekend. That's why I'm putting us on guard now, and I would have thought it will be next week or the week after, but that's a finger in the air from me. Thank you for those who've asked to find extra webinars helpful at this stage. Thanks, Alison. Thanks for the kind comments. I'm going to, at that point, thank you for your comments. As I say, I hope you've had a chance to digest. If you've got any feedback or you think my analysis is miles off, I would appreciate an email. If you've had internal company discussion, which of those documents from the UK government, and you are miles away from where my thinking is, it would be useful for me to know. I think that you can put different interpretations on the documents as they are, but I've given you my best analysis, and I hope that's of use. As I say, we're going to do an additional webinar next week alongside our upcoming events. So in addition to the webinar next Friday at 3, if something comes out between now and then, we'll do a networking lunch in Stevenage on the 6th of September. Brexit Lead Networkers, Laura has mentioned an additional one on the 19th of September. I think by then people will be well into it. Another webinar at the end of September, along with the Women in Biotech event. We're up in Oxford at the beginning of October, and on the 18th we'll have the Bioscience Forum in London, our main autumn event, which is going to have some fantastic content about the perspectives from Germany, as well as the perspectives of ourselves on Brexit, and Sir Mark Walport, a UKRI, talking about investment in our ecosystem and bioprocesses in Edinburgh towards the end of November. If you're not a member and you'd like to join, we'd very much, Jane Wall, our Director of Business Development and Membership Services, would love to hear from you. I've mentioned that we're going to do a no deal scenario, extra one of these if we can, if there's anything sensible, 3 o'clock rather than 4 next week, and we'll open that up on the website next week. And after that, we'll do one on Friday, 28th of September in normal order. With that, I'd like to thank you and hopefully speak to you next week. Many thanks.